although I thought so much about our topic today, and it's something I've never spoke about, and it turns out it's kind of an elephant in the room for, well, for my mom and for my friends who are a little bit older than me. I want to talk about dementia and cognitive change and how it relates to our practice. So, and I will just start off by saying that my parents, when they were my age, so I'm 53, so they were in, their somewhat of their prime, and I remember them telling us that if something were to go wrong with their body or their mind, to just pull the plug, right? And it seemed very heroic, and we were very proud of our parents for having that frontier attitude. If we're no longer useful, just put us out to the forest. And then in 2010, my dad got a glioblastoma, which, if you know, it's a type of brain tumor that it takes you down pretty fast. And he said, my life is diminished and I still like it. I like this life. And he went and got the surgery, and he did some other things. And he said, I've changed my mind. And I was so proud of him for changing his mind and choosing to stay with us. And then he changed a bit. He has a brain tumor. He has something changing his mind. But parts of him were very much the same. In fact, like his body, this idea that half of your brain is really inside your whole cellular structure. I mean, his fundamental core self was there, even though there were parts of him that emerged. New parts of him emerged, I would say. And we loved him. I loved him. We all did. It was, even when he was difficult. So this, this idea of Alzheimer's is really one of the elephants in the room. And the discussion, I notice, kind of ends quickly, and it's charged with fear and, a few stabs at some preventative measures. So I just wanted to talk about that today a little bit and shed some light on it that I find to be just very helpful in my own thinking about it. Fear is definitely the big part of Alzheimer's. It's just a disease, and yet it's not. It's one of the most feared diseases in the U.S. We worry about cancer, but we fear this change in our cognition. And the reactions are kind of overwhelming. Like, people have a knee-jerk reaction, thinking of themselves having some kind of cognitive change. And for example, quotes from people, if I get a diagnosis, I'm going straight to the gun shop. It's the worst thing that could ever happen to a person. I look in my own husband's face when he discusses his mom, she's in late stage dementia, and you can see there's a lot of fear and worry. So what led me to want to speak about this is I read a wonderful article in The Sun. It's a literary magazine that I love. And it's an interview with a woman by the name of Lynn Harper. And she was educated as a chaplain, I think at Wake Forest. And she now works at Riverside Church up in Manhattan, which I used to live right by Riverside Church. So, And she works exclusively with elderly people. I think her photo looks like she's maybe middle-aged, and particularly with people with dementia in the community service realm. Like, she's building community. And she herself has a high incidence of Alzheimer's in her family. Her dad has it. Her grandfather died of it. Or no, her dad has markers, the genetic markers. Apparently you can get a test for it. She's high probability, according to her. So anyway, she wrote a book called On Vanishing: Mortality, Dementia, and What It Means to Disappear. And from what I can see from her interview, she has a very different and novel approach to it, and she speaks about a lot of things that really resonate with me and really make me feel less fear and more hope and more comfort. And in her interview, as I was reading it, I recognized a lot of teachings of the Buddha and a lot of what we do in meditation and mindfulness. And I can say from my own personal experience, because, especially since my father, the longer I practice meditation and mindfulness and study the teachings, in my case of the Buddha, but these spiritual teachings, the less fearful I am of dementia. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So Harper's really her goal is to reshape our relationship with dementia. And she feels that our culture, the nature of our Western culture, has problems with it that she feels need to be addressed, and she's very much involved in making that happen. So 2 things she sees as deep flaws in Western culture is that it devalues people who are no longer seen as contributors. What are you doing? What are you producing? The other thing she points to is the overvaluing of self-sufficiency. Overvaluing self-sufficiency and independence, right? It's one thing to be a wonderfully independent individual, and it's another thing to take that to an extreme, to where you are feeling uncomfortable with needing help, right? And so she, her advocacy work focuses around sort of changing this relationship, this idea of what those of us who have cognitive change, what we represent. And for example, she talks about obviously better integration of those of us with dementia into our family and community as opposed to being separated, acknowledgement of the contributions, and I'll get to that a little bit later. This one kind of blows my mind, the contributions that are available to us from people that have this change. And then the honesty, having the honesty to know that we are all prone. We are all prone to the possibility. And in my case, I'm already experiencing, I don't know if that's just, a nature of menopause, but you feel it. You feel it as you age. You feel the change. So having the honesty that this happens to all of us, and in some way more, in some ways less, but it's a possibility for me and for you. And so keeping that in mind as we relate to the situation. So So the problems in thinking about it the way that we do is, number one, this fear of dependence. This fear we have of dependence. Like, what if I have to rely on others? I don't want to be a burden to anyone. Right? And it sounds so heroic. But it's cultural. Like, we're not, I envision, like, for some reason, I envision sort of Native Americans with a tribe with their teepees. And in that case, if you had someone who was frail and weak, why, okay, maybe then, it's a burden to the community, and, we're not able to value that individual because of the survival of our tribe. But that's not us. We're modern, post-industrial Westerners. We don't have those issues. And so we have great capacity to care. We don't need to be heroic. So, and, I think of my husband's culture, which is very, they don't value independence to such a degree, and there's a lot of intergenerational households, and their outcomes on dementia are much different than ours. So there's this fear of dependence that we have that kind of, it clouds the issue. Fear usually does that. And then the second thing she talks about is this idea of aging successfully. She talks about, the baby boomers apparently have, this notion of like being a super senior. Are you in the successful aging club? Like, are you kicking it? And this is great. And don't get me wrong, it offers wonderful inspiration to take care of oneself well, and to eat properly and get your exercise. Don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating for anything less than and great self-care. However, when it's you experiencing the limitations, right, that life may well bring you, because not everything is in our control, then that idea of the super senior successful aging person doesn't work anymore, right? Because now you're on the outside of the club. And so having the club in the first place is what she's talking about is that it's less than helpful. It's actually harmful. It's not realistic. She quotes a quote that I found very compelling. Harper says, "I want to question the assumption that dementia brings only unrelenting suffering." I want to question that assumption, that dementia brings only unrelenting suffering. This is the story that we hear. It's a tragic story, and she says that not a single person has come back from having Alzheimer's to tell us about it. What was it like? Same, obviously, with death. But she interviewed a dementia activist, someone who has a diagnosis, and he said to her, his name was Jim, he said, "Tell them we're not suffering." From the outside looking in, you make assumptions based on who you are and how you are and what makes you feel well. But we don't know. It reminds me of an amazing book I read on happiness. And there was one chapter, a vignette, on a twin girls born conjoined at the hip. I can't remember what they call that kind of twin, but the scientists and doctors wanted to do the operation to separate them. And then they were unable to come up with a good plan, and eventually they figured out a way that they could do it. And the girls were, by then, I think they were teenagers. And the girls were like, no, why would we want to do that? We are happy. We always are with one another. We always have someone to talk to. We're always in company. We're never alone. Like, no. I read that and it really blew my mind. Of course you want to be separate and not have someone connected to you at your hip. Of course not. But that's my experience. What do I know about your experience in that situation? She also recounted a story of a son whose mom developed Alzheimer's, and his relationship with her was difficult because she was a bit stoic and didn't share too much affection with him. And when her brain changed, she started to hug and kiss him. And his relationship with her changed right away. So much as to say that good things can happen. Like in life, there's good things, there's bad things. And this subject is just most often fraught with stories of suffering. And just can we question? Can we open our minds for alternative ways of thinking? The Buddhist perspective is interesting. There's a Buddhist perspective, and then there's sort of the mystic perspective. The Buddhist perspective, so imagine yourself, somebody gives you a box of some stuff that you haven't seen since you were in 6th grade, and you open the box and you take out some stuff that you've written, maybe letters to friends or papers that you wrote or your diary. And you can imagine reading it, and you've guaranteed forgotten everything or most of it. And it's not who you are anymore, right? So you're reading this and you're like, oh, you're discovering this former you, this 6th grade you. And it's a part of you, right? You're who you are now, at the age you are now, the person you are in this present moment. And yet you're not going to throw out the 6th grade you. And the reason I mention this is because this is this notion that we are constantly changing. We're subject to impermanence. We're subject to relentless change. And who we are today is completely different to who we were last year based on all those things that happened to us, our experiences. It's the same with when we have dementia coming to visit us. We have this idea in our mind, it's a fixed idea of the pre-dementia self and then the self that has dementia. And it's like this binary, this idealized version of us now and this kind of scary version of us, this unknown version of us. But all parts of us, the past, the present, they're all valid, whether we remember them or not. Like that 6th grader, you don't remember it until somebody brings it up and reminds you of it. And yet it's still part of who you are. So just to say that we as selves we're not these constant items that span time and space. We're changing constantly. And so this idea of permanence and personality, it causes suffering. It causes delusional thinking. So that's one thing that came to mind. And the other thing that came to mind is this notion that we practice meditation and mindfulness as a way to to start to experiment with being in between our thoughts. Like we have these thoughts, right? We sit in meditation and the thoughts are coming, and a lot of them are obsessive and a little bit difficult. And we practice coming back to the breath, and we practice coming back to the body as a way to step out of the stories, right? This is what we're working towards. We want to come into this place that's quiet and still. And the reason we like to do that, not that we want to spend our whole life without a thought in our head, but there's a real peace. There's a real, it's almost indescribable, a sense of like groundedness, this stillness, when you're able to stay away from the stories, even for just a few moments. It's funny, they're outside. I don't know if you can hear it. There's a lot of noise outside here. When you wander, you run into the kitchen, you want to get something to eat, and you're thinking about what I have to do, whatever. And those moments when you can remember to come back to the present moment and just open the door. Oh, I'm opening the cabinet door. Here's my hand taking the cup, removing it. You're really having these experiences that are right in the present moment. And it feels wonderful. It feels like you're coming home when you're in the present moment. And so, my question is, this kind of addiction that we have to thinking that we're trying to break, we're trying to get a break from sometimes. I advocate plenty of thinking, skillful thinking, and also finding times when we don't have to be consumed by our thinking. It's like you're dropping into this divine silence. And so my question for you is it possible that a person with dementia is potentially moving into a divine state? Is it possible? Yes. Yes. Thank you. I think what you point to is something that interests me greatly, which is your relationship to the person who's having this cognitive change, whose dementia is taking, quote unquote, taking them away from you or changing them or something. Like, can we change our own attitude to see this not as diminished capacity, even though that's what, it appears to be on the outside, but can we see it as an increased ability to relate to the divine? Like if what the mystics say is true, that you meet God in the place beyond concept, beyond conceptual thinking, is it possible that that this is what's happening? And I'll bring one example in. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the great poet, he had dementia, and it was a state where he was in the moment, very much in the present moment, and it was a condition for which he'd previously expressed great admiration. Right? So he was as a poet, he was striving towards this, and then whoop. So at the end of his life, his friends, they said that his mind was in heaven. They said that he had reached the peak, not the valley. And his friends enjoyed his presence. His friends really enjoyed this. And so, being in this state of presence, in my experience, is one of the greatest gifts that we can offer to others. really being grounded and being there. So when someone else comes into our orbit, so to speak, really being able to just be there, not busy, but just still and being, and allowing them to be who they need to be. So, what if we can learn to receive this gift of presence from our friends and family who have dementia? What if we can learn to receive that instead of judging and analyzing what you've lost and how you've changed? Of course, you need to analyze that because you need to provide care and things like that. But that's a portion of it. What if we can, for the rest of the time, actually sit and enjoy and bask in that presence that person is offering? And what if we can offer back our own simple presence instead of trying to, think about it and worry about it? What if we can just be in their presence? Well, so you're bringing forth these issues that are, they're the broader issues. And what I'm most concerned about now is you. The world puts out all of these causes and conditions that we have to manage. But what about me and what about you? What is our work now with this? What is our inner work? That's what I'm most concerned about. Because all the other work is going to be there and affects us, but what is the core? What is the core work? And in my humble opinion, the core work around this dementia that, when I get it, you could say it like that to make it more helpful, make it more real, so you can really sort of investigate it, is can we love ourselves wholly, especially when diminished capacity arises? This is the heart of it. And this is physically, yes, but since dementia affects the mind, it's this place of fear for us. Can we love ourselves wholly, especially when that arises? Can we stop dismissing ourselves now? Can we stop abusing ourselves now? Can we stop thinking about ourselves as less than when we forget something or can't concentrate? Can we stop beating ourselves up now and embrace ourselves? Oh, this too, yeah, this is a part of you, and it's okay. You're okay. This, talking to yourself, this does not make me less worthy of my own love. Saying, I can love even this, even now, even amidst of this. It's okay. Starting right now. Me, I forget things all the time, and no one blames my age yet. But in a few years' time, I will be at the age where the things that I forget now will then be attributed to my age, like everyone else, like Joe Biden. If you live long enough, all your normal gaffes eventually get assigned to your age. Start leaning in now. I love you. It's okay. You are divine. And meditate. Because I'm a huge believer in pray hard, but be practical, right? So some of the things that help prevent and ward off cognitive decline are good nutrition, eating good food, exercising, and social connection. Now, on top of that, because meditation has not been studied for more than a couple of decades, but there are lots of new studies out that say that meditation, regular way meditation, is proven. So I have this week I was just all about this, finding out about it. And so meditation, daily meditation, and we're going to do one together. I know I'm running a little bit over, but we're going to do a meditation, a special one that has been used in these studies. It's different than what we do, but it's similar as well. It's just concentrating the mind. Maybe you've heard of telomeres. Telomeres are little portions of our DNA that have been the focus of a lot of study, because when the telomeres sort of decay a little bit, that's when cognitive decline starts. So telomeres are like a little protective cap on the end of your DNA. And meditation, along with all the other things that it's shown to help, increases telomerase by 43%. The largest ever recorded, the largest change ever recorded. So this meditation is really at the forefront of Alzheimer's disease prevention. It's at the forefront. Like, wow, what we do here makes a difference in your mind. It protects your mind. So with that, I think we better meditate.